Hello and welcome to the Recruiting EQ podcast. I'm Rick Coluccio, and this is episode number 88, AI and the Human in the Room, with our special guest, Shaun Cheatham. Shaun, how's it going?
Good, Rick. How are you?
Doing good. I am up in Toronto for those who are just joining this, so it is very cold, but I guess I can't complain. It's the life we chose in Canada. How's the weather for you, Shaun?
Well, I'm in Nashville, so it's cold here too. So probably not as cold as you guys, but it's cold.
Florida got hit real bad a couple days ago with this.
Yeah, on my home state. Yeah, it got killed. Yeah, definitely. So I'm excited for a little warmer weather, which hopefully will be around the corner. So
yeah, hopefully. Fingers are crossed. For now,
Yeah.
Stay warm, everyone.
Yeah.
Very excited to have you here today, Shaun, for a number of reasons. There's a ton of stuff that we could talk about, but before we get into it too far, it'd be great if you could just give everyone who's listening a brief introduction about who you are and what you're up to.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I've been in the staffing industry now for 30 plus years. Currently work for Hays, which is a global organization based out of the UK. And I'm help run their technology organization from a staffing perspective. So, I've really specialized in tech my whole career, with the exception of maybe a couple of early years. Spent a lot of time client facing, talking to clients about what's happening in the world, specifically around some of the challenges, the pace that everything's moving right now, and trying to solve solutions and solve problems for people.
And that's a whole sidebar even that we could perhaps touch on a little bit without. I'd love to get into the actual topic of AI and the human in the room because I find it fascinating. But tech recruitment has changed a lot over the years. And I'm not even in it, but just from talking to people. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I've been in it way too long, I think, at this point in time. It's I've never seen anything like it over the last 5 years. I mean, and COVID played a big part of that, right? The world changed, and coming out of COVID, everybody wanted to do something big, right? So, a lot of the big tech companies hired tremendous amount of people and really kind of launched the wave of changing technology that, you didn't have to be that techie anymore. You didn't have to be the person who got your degree in computer science or grew up, programming and by the age of 5 and so forth and so on. You became an individual that everybody could get into tech, right? Because,
Right.
I mean, let's face it, we all use tech every day. And I mean, God knows I use AI every day.
It's ubiquitous.
So it's becoming a world where, you really see people like coming from all different types of walks. And, Rick, and you and I talked about this. Like, I'm on the other side here. You're asking the questions. I'm usually the one asking the questions. I have my own podcast.
That too, though, yeah.
Yeah, that we talk about tech, and I've just interviewing people that have had really unique backgrounds, and from a professional ballerina, turning into a chief information security officer later in life, right?
That's amazing.
That's the way the world is, and I think certainly tech has changed in a lot of ways the good. But right now there's just a lot of uncertainty, and AI has created that for a lot of people, and how
Sure.
what's the best way to use it, and I think that's really a lot to be seen so far.
Absolutely. Well, let's talk about that for a second, because you're the first podcast guest that I have on this podcast who is also a podcast host, who hosts the Hays Tech podcast, which is called "How Did You Get That Job?"
Yeah.
How many episodes are you guys up to now?
Let's see. We're on season 5, so I think we did 10, so just right around 50. So yeah.
And clearly, Hays, being the juggernaut of staffing globally, is a much more widely listened to podcast than this one. No shade on us, but tough to keep with the juggernaut that is Hays. But it's awesome, though, to be at that large sort of in that large arena talking about these vital issues that, like, to your point, I think touch all of our lives, not just people who are heavy into tech.
Yeah, and I think for me, what it's really brought to me is just the simple fact that I've talked to people from all over the world that I probably would have never talked to if I didn't have the podcast. And while technology presents similar challenges across the world, it's how they deal with them was the unique part of that. And certainly, obviously, local rules and regulations and laws and so forth are, certainly dictate the way some people interact within technology and AI specifically. But yeah, it's fun. I tell people all the time, I never even listened to a podcast before I started doing
And
it.
you're very good at it. I mean, I've listened to a number of episodes, even just the most recent ones, though. I think that it's also genuinely really interesting topics conversation that don't really have that you don't have to be in recruitment or in tech to get into. Like just to read a couple of the recent episode titles alone, how humans remain crucial to resilient cybersecurity. I want to hear all about that. I mean, I did listen to some of it, but you know what I'm saying? Like the idea of cybersecurity is such a big one, but also like AI taking things over, the necessity for humans to be involved in the process with AI. Obviously, that's a lot of where we're going today. But I
Yeah.
mean, how do you feel about doing this podcast, speaking to people about this on behalf of Hayes? Has it just changed your view on not only your job but on technology? Period.
Yeah. I mean, I think in a lot of respects, it's opened my eyes up to a lot of things too. I
Yeah.
mean, specifically, um, how in a lot of ways, while people's journeys are very, very different, how they get there is pretty much a commonality of, I'm interviewing people who have become executives in big tech companies, the big brands and so forth. And they all have one thing in common is that they're just really driven and really focused on being successful and working hard and improving their technology acumen every single day.
Yeah.
And I think that's been the part that is, you know, my podcast is not meant to be a tech podcast. It's really meant to be about people and how
Right.
they got to where they are in technology. And that is probably the one thing that I've really enjoyed the most is just really kind of correlating the fact that everybody has traveled very different paths to get to where they are, but they've all had the same thing in common, and that's again just their work ethic and their desire to be successful.
Yeah, and I mean, certainly just from having conversations with you and checking it out, one of the more widely listened to podcasts in the space that crosses recruitment anyway and technology for sure. Um, have you gotten like a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? Like just people reaching out to you to talk to you about stuff podcast related, like separate from work. It's separate from the Hayes work.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I actually, it's interesting because we do the LinkedIn Live thing too with the podcast, and it's always amazing how many connects requests I get after those land. Um, so yeah, I mean, I get quite a few people. I mean, you definitely get people with have varying opinions, whether it's pro what we were talking about or not. So I think that's just a part about being, putting something out there in the world and asking for feedback from people. But I think the fascinating thing is that I get reach outs, but I see the reach outs that go to the people that I interview
Yeah.
and how generous they are with their time to go in and answer and give feedback and so forth. So to me, that's kind of like the part that's really unique is you're connecting people with individuals who've been successful, have a lot of experience in it, and they're sharing their advice on how to get there as well.
It's this interesting thing that I find recruiting has brought to me as someone. I got into recruiting in my 30s only, right? So I've been in it for going on 15 years, but I got into it pretty late. And what I didn't realize is that it is an interesting way to just get into have conversations with people who are successful people and add the layer of the podcast to it like you're doing, especially at that larger level where you guys, I assume, and forgive me if I'm wrong, but you guys have tens of thousands of listeners per episode, if I recall,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
which is way up there, right? Like on a per episode basis. So you have these great guests, but I mean, I think it's valuable conversation with people where if you called them as a sales rep from a recruiting company, they probably there's a layer there where people are a bit more guarded to just sort of have these deeper conversations with you. But if it's to interview them on a podcast and go at this forum, I feel like you can get into much more substantial, meaningful conversations about like what are we all doing here with technology? Where is this all going? How is this changing our day-to-day lives? And have you found that those conversations can get more deeply personal or just existential than they would if you were talking to them as a Hayes or as someone who is just a Hayes rep, let's say?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the thing that's been unique about it is, we've had a very diverse group of individuals who've been on it, and quite a few women have been on the program, and they talk about, what it's like to be in tech as a woman, and
Right.
how different it is. And I think it's, they share very personal stories about things that they've experienced, and especially people who've been in it for a while, and the difference between when they first got in it to today, and how different it is. And they're so open about it. They're so open about being vulnerable, and the challenges and frustrations of some of the aspects of being, in some cases, the only person in the room who is female, and there's 100 people in the room, and the challenges that go along with that, and trying to stand out and so forth. And then having the take of individuals who are fairly new in the industry, and having the same experiences, right? And just going, wow, why isn't the world changing as rapidly as it should be? And but yeah, no, I totally think everybody, you definitely get to know people on the show. And then, as you're aware, you and I've had a couple of conversations prior to this,
Yep,
for us
sure
doing this. You get to know people on a different level, because you are like, exploring and talking about them, and really understanding what's important, and how that all works.
Well, yeah, absolutely. I was a bit disappointed that you went that you went where you went with that conversation of saying to hear that some of the same challenges are still existing today. It's like, I was hoping that the women were going to be like, and it's all fixed. Life is so much better.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, some of them. I mean, certainly the ones who've been in it a while say they'll tell you that it's definitely gotten tremendously better. But from interviewing you know, a young lady that was in her late 20s, and she was already a C-level executive within an organization, and
Oh, wow.
trying to get credibility as being not only a woman, but also a very young woman, but just incredibly bright and incredibly sharp, and worked really hard to get to where she is. And, walking into a room, and people asking her, okay, when's your boss getting here? You must be the assistant, right? So,
Oh, yeah. And then being like, yeah, and then having to eat
yeah,
humble pie and be like, oh shit.
exactly. Yeah.
Um, yeah, I mean that's all super fascinating, and all the changes as well, for better and worse. The rate of change, as someone who's more of an observer. Like, I used to sell tech for a big VAR years and years ago. That was like over 20 years ago. So I've been out of the game really, aside from just speaking to people who are really in it. But so I'm absolutely no expert. So I'm literally asking you this question because of curiosity. But the rate of change around tech and the tech space, particularly since COVID, to me seems absurd, to the point where, like, how do you even follow what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, no, and you're absolutely right. I mean, I've never seen anything like it. And again, having done this 30 years and been a part of tech for that long. Yeah, COVID really changed the world. I mean, it definitely, people became much more mindful about being innovative. You go from everybody working in an office, and then the very next day, everybody's remote, and the things that you have to do to change, and the technology that you need. And talking to a lot of clients and companies, about what happened during that time, was really the need to innovate. And when there's a need for innovation, then people really lean in technology, and you can see it. I mean, and now with people have been talking about AI for 20 years. I mean, it's not
Well,
a
sure,
new
yeah,
thing.
absolutely.
But nothing ever came about it. I mean, I've been listening to people talk about AI for years and years and years. And until recently, it's just now a thing, right? Like, where it's like every company has got or is working on some type of strategy and plan. And who knows where that's going to take the technology world, right? I mean, we're just like literally scratching the surface of where we are. And, we think, I look back and go, wow, technology is changing so rapidly right now. Well, what's going to happen once everybody really starts implementing, AI and all the things that it can do for us? And what does that look like in the world of work? Which I think is really a fascinating thing to think about is, how will this benefit some and in some cases potentially hurt others? So.
Absolutely. And I mean, this touches on, so for current in our podcast format, I often ask people directly, how has your market changed? Whatever. We've just sort of organically launched into it because it is tech after all. But one of the questions I like to ask people who are in recruitment in particular that aren't necessarily in tech, but in any vertical of recruitment is also like, how has the day-to-day changed? And by that, I mean, what are the things that currently you yourself or the company or Hayes as a company think are a job that a human being should do, right? Like the things that need to get done. Some of them are, this is a job. We need to hire a human to do this job. And then there are other things that are getting relegated to, well, this is more of a task. This we can farm out to a tool or automate it or whatever. It's just a task that can be automated. It's no longer a job we need to offer a human being. How have you seen that evolve, and what is your take on that whole?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a lot has to do with the human interaction, right? And then the non-human interaction. And if you think about what can AI help us with, it's the day-to-day tedious task that we spend over and over and over again doing. Very repetitive, very not consequential from a relationship standpoint, but consequential from if you don't do them and you don't have track of it, things fall through the cracks. That to me is where we're headed, and I think a lot of our clients are headed, is how do we actually utilize AI to take that burden off of people. From where humans need to be in the room is the relationship aspect of it, right? The things that, like, if something doesn't work, who's actually going to be the backup to that? Or if I've got to go out and build a relationship on how to sell the tools that we're building and use it, how we utilize AI, who's going to do that, right? And I think the challenge for companies, at all companies right now, that when I'm talking to people, is what does that look like, right? What can we automate? What can we actually use AI to help us as an organization grow, expand, be more cost effective? And then how do we utilize our human base to really interact with our customers, our internal customers, and so forth? And what does that look like? So, I think in our world, it's really just looking at the repetitive and trying to figure out how do we get more efficient with AI to take care of it, so we can, being in the sales organization, let our salespeople go out there and interact with more individuals and sell.
Yep, that's definitely interesting, but it's a pivot toward human to human jobs, like jobs where you're dealing with people in the job market that may go up because the company's more efficient and thus it needs more of that. Like, I'd read some study about IBM getting rid of X number of jobs because of AI, that they're automated, but then hiring, opening up X, like the same number roughly of new positions because of increased business from the efficiency. So, but they're different jobs, right? They're not coder jobs, especially collar coder jobs. Those are actually done, and these are ones that have more to do with humans, people skills. How is that evolving from your perspective and what you've been speaking to with people about this?
No, I mean, I think that everything that I've read, everything that I've heard when talking to people is that, yes, jobs are going to change. I mean, there's no question. I think that's going to happen, but there's going to be so much that comes out of it. I have people ask me all the time, is how do I stand out in the world where, AI is, everybody's using some type of AI filter, for job, for candidate intake, right?
Right.
And how do I stand out? And the answer is really, you have to be more diligent about, like, how are you going to stand out in the crowd? How are you going to get in front of people? And when I mean diligent, is you got to spend more time on your resume. You got to make sure that you've got all the buzzwords in your resume. Are you using AI to help you do that, right? And and then it really just comes down to the human interaction is how much are you interacting with people in that organization to try and stand out, right? As opposed to just send and pray, right?
Yeah.
It's you really have to, be more aggressive about your job search and your network search, right? You have to use your network more in the world today to try and stand out. And I think that's becoming more and more problematic, especially for kids coming out of college.
Right.
Because you see specifically in tech, where it's hurt the people the most, where AI is companies are now not utilizing people coming out of school, junior talent, new learners to fill those positions. They're using AI to do those things. And so you see like people coming out in specifically in tech struggling to find opportunities. And I get the question from them is how do I stand out? And you got to get your internships in. You've got to make yourself out there so you can create a network and build a network. But yeah, it's a real challenge. And I think it poses some interesting issues for clients down the road because they're not creating a funnel of talent.
Yeah, for sure.
But certainly for now, for people coming out of school, they've got to find a way to create a network and work a network to help them, really stand out in a world that is shrinking.
Yeah, almost work on their personal brand from a career perspective in the same way as they might really work their Instagram profile for their friends and so on. Like using those same kinds of social media skills from a career standpoint is not something that I get a lot of young people seem to think is important when I speak to them out of college. I think they seem to think that, what school they went to, their grades, talents, skills are gonna be what it is, and obviously you need to have some minimum people skill. But I'm just kind of like, I don't know if that's enough anymore. I just don't know if that's enough anymore.
The interesting thing is that I've heard from hiring leaders almost my whole career is, I see people who come out of school, they know what they're doing, they know the tools and so forth, but it's the intangible aspect of it that is where they fall short, right? And not, to your point, not working on the social aspect, the social skills of this, the personal skills, interpersonal skills are really, really important. And to stand out in a world where getting your foot in the door is getting harder and harder, it's even more important. And really like trying to figure out, how do I interact with people? How do I have, conversations? How do I communicate? How do I reach out to people that I don't know and have that conversation and be comfortable with it?
Yeah. And we're talking about similarly, almost two generations, I want to say, who very popularly say that they cannot stand to make a phone call at all, that talking on the phone is super stressful and for someone else and not for themselves. They'd rather do text and email. And so we've evolved as a culture to where younger people are just kind of like, why in God's name would I speak to someone on the phone? Like, what is this?
Yeah.
Like, why do I have to do this terrible thing? To being like, hey, by the way, you need to get really comfortable with that. And not only that, you have to talk to strangers. You have to, like, it's just flipped so quickly on these poor kids culturally that they're going to have to sort of do all the things that they don't want to do and are scared of doing anyway, in order to stand out immediately.
Yeah, no, and having raised a daughter of that generation, and remembering, okay, call and set your own dentist appointment or call and set your own hair appointment. But what do you mean I got a call? Just pick up the phone and call. It's not that. But you to your point, I mean, they've been given tools of technology that have made their life significantly easier from how they interact, but also maybe not as comfortable in situations where they're not doing on a day. I'm for me, picking up the phone was just what you did, right? You didn't have the tool to go do it online. So I'm an old man. So I remember all the stuff that the kids today wouldn't even know what it is, a fax machine and so forth and so on. But
same. I've had several younger people tell me specifically this, in whether recruiting or what have you. They're just kind of like, I had a voicemail And I knew it was you, Rick. Do you know how I know it was you? And I'm like, how? I'm like, you're the only person who leaves me voicemail. I don't even need to check my missed calls.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah.
Like, okay, all right, old hashtag old for me.
Yeah.
But also,
Yeah. That's interesting. I've never thought of that before, but yeah, that makes sense because they just text, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's
You
what
just
happens.
call,
Yeah.
you know. Okay, so that, I mean, I do find that really fascinating because I also think that there's probably a disparity in terms of the courses that people take and people who are still about to graduate in things in jobs that are tech related that they thought 3 years ago, 2 years ago were going to be a great idea, or maybe 3, 4 years ago. And now are they even going to exist any longer? Particularly in coding jobs is what I have on the top of my mind. But are there streams that you see like, hey, these jobs are going to disappear? Get out of that stream as soon as you can, college grads.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know that I'm sitting here saying they're going to go away. I think they'll probably change, right? I do think, and kind of going back to what we talked about earlier, the jobs that are repetitive, right? That if you're sitting in a job today and you're doing the same thing over and over and over again, I mean, that's a risk, right? There's certainly, AI is designed to, do a lot of things for us, and one of them is to take over those types of tasks. We've seen that for years and years with, calling into a company and having to play the number game to hopefully eventually talk to a live person.
Yeah.
But now it's just advanced so much to where, you can see that those roles will definitely not be in a position where you're going to need as many bodies to do that. Doesn't mean that there won't still need to be a human in the room. It just means that, you're not going to need call centers that have, thousands of people in them. Maybe that's hundreds of people. And it's just a different way of looking at the world, especially in tech. And I think the coding aspect will have an impact. I heard something. I attended a conference, an AI conference a few months ago, and it talked about, it's not necessarily that it will go away. It's just if you learn how to actually set it up in AI and enhance it, it becomes basically a tool that makes your work faster, smarter, and in some cases better, right? Because you have an opportunity to use something. It takes time to set it up, but once you've set it up and you've used it, and you know how to use it, it can become a very, very useful tool for developers to utilize. What that looks like in the future, I mean, I still don't think everybody really knows. I mean, everybody's kind of guessing.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I wouldn't, I'm wary of the people who are like, here's what's going to happen in 5 years. It's going to be, and it's like, how the heck do we know what's going to happen in 6 months, honestly?
Yeah, no, I think that's like a big part of it. It's like in 6 months from now, something else could completely change. And it's probably, the advancements and the way that you utilize it and the way people are adopting it, I think it's going to play a big part of that, right? The more we use it as a society, the more it will advance and the more things will change.
So, Shaun, you mentioned a couple of things, which I find really interesting, and I'd love to dig down on more on this topic. One of them being, post-COVID, tech companies hired a ton of people. We all saw it. It was crazy. I mean, not just tech companies, but it was astronomical. 2021, 2022, for us who are working in recruitment, we were just kind of like, does anyone else think this is bonkers? Like, you know what I mean?
I wasn't complaining back then. I wasn't complaining. No. It was great.
No, but some of it was just wild, right? Like some of it made sense. And then of course there's the sort of market correction, quote unquote, which some people were like, is this a recession? Is it not? Technically, no. Market correction, tons of layoffs. And then you throw the AI factor in right after. So they're kind of two separate things that happened that coincide. And now you and I specifically talked about, and I would love to hear your thought on this. In that aftermath, now we're looking at AI sort of being integrated in a lot of companies, and particularly for people who are getting their start now. We touched on it a little bit, right? Like, getting jobs, but like, what are the things that you see that if you could give people a sense of what they're walking into, the market different from what it was before, you know what I mean?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's again, 2022 was chaos. I mean, it
Yeah.
was, I've never, having been in this for a really long time and having lived through a variety of downswings and upswings and so forth, that was unreal.
Yeah.
What was happening in the market.
Real.
You just couldn't work fast enough. Um, and then, yeah, I mean, the pivot has been dramatic. So, and I think in a lot of respects, some of it's, you know, the overhiring that happened in COVID, some of it's the AI angle, some of it's the geopolitical landscape that's going on
Mm,
right now.
totally.
Um, and I think, you know, for me, it, it's 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 really a matter of companies are just being cautious, and and people who work at companies are being cautious, right? We see the lowest amount of job changing that we've seen in years. And if people don't change jobs, then there's usually not a lot of jobs created, right? So I've seen such a focus by companies that are trying to be more mindful of retention than I've ever seen in the time I've been in the staffing business.
Really.
They really, really, you know, like everybody I talk to is, you know, what's your growth strategy for this year? Don't have one. We're really focused on retention.
Well, okay.
And I hear that over and over and over again, is really focus on retention. Got to do more with what we with less. We don't have, you know, every company out there has projects that need to get done, but because of where we are in the market, and, you know, the trying to figure out how to use AI, trying to figure out the geopolitical landscape and where it's going to pivot to. Um, you know, everybody's just being really, really cautious, and it's on both sides, and that creates a weird staffing world, right?
It sure does.
Yes. So, and you know, and I've been saying for 4 years now that, oh, you know, come January things will get better, or oh, wait till the summer things will pick up, and it's just hasn't been that way. I mean, we've seen blips here and there, but it's nowhere near what it used to be, and it may never again either. I mean, I think companies are trying to take different avenues on um, how they, you know, staff their organization, and I think that could be, you know, what we see for a while. I think it'll come back at some point in time, and but probably never to 2022 level. I don't
Sure.
see that ever happening again.
I kind of hope not, because we've seen what the fallout is like from that. And I feel like in recruitment, as someone who recruits recruiters, particularly like myself, we saw people get straight out of school, just part-time job during school, no experience in anything really full-time, get 5 offers while we're trying to get them into a staffing agency that's offering them, let's say, 65K base plus a commission, which is more than what they were offering prior for a brand new grad. But then they're getting 80 and 85 and 90K offers to be a senior talent acquisition specialist for an insurance company or whatever. And it's like, but you're not going to be able to meet your metrics. And they didn't. And then they got let go after 6-12
Yeah.
months. So now they've had a taste of a high salary. They've been thrust into a job they weren't prepared for because they needed to fill that seat, and Lord knows why people need, you know what I mean? But now their career's sort of messed up. Or like all the people who left agency staffing to go work for Meta or Amazon or Google, and then there's a huge cull, and now they're trying to come back to staffing agencies, and we're like, when you go internal, it makes it you're less, you know, it's that you've defected to the dark side or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's like harder to get back in. So like these big booms have a large impact, I think, on a lot of people's lives and careers, really.
Yeah. No, I think it's a great point. I mean, you know, it was in a lot of ways, it just reset basically the market.
Yeah.
And I think, the fallout from that has been what we've seen is just, you know, people being, you know, more mindful of, like, I mean, it's not that companies didn't have retention plans beforehand. It's just, you know, now they're really, really like focused on it, right? They're really trying to make sure that, um, you know, they spend all this energy and time getting these people up to speed and so forth, that, you know, okay, now how do we keep them?
Yeah.
And certainly COVID, because of the boom and the salary increases that happened, there was a lot of disparity going on. So you had people, you couldn't you may have had people as developers paying them, $75,000 a year, but to hire anybody new, you had to pay them $95,000 for the
Yeah,
exact same. And so then you created animosity within your own organization because people are going, well, wait a minute, that person came in at a much higher salary than what I'm paying. Why don't I
totally.
just go look and get a pay raise, right? And that doesn't that's certainly leveled off now, but the aftermath of that is created, challenges, I think, for a lot of companies and trying to figure out how do you grow that mid and senior talent and not go broke doing it, right? Um,
Yeah, and I also hear from a number of people in tech, even just friends of mine and or people that I speak to peripherally, even though it's not my my main job to recruit tech people. But when I do speak to them who are in the sort of, let's say, early to middle management, they're finding a lot of difficulty even getting anyone who's willing to match their current salary where they're at, and they're having difficulty finding a ceiling where they can't really move up, and they don't really know how solvent the business that they're in is in let's say a SaaS company or whatever, like small to mid-sized companies. And so they're like, do I just stay? Like, are people going to wonder at some point why I stayed in this it just as a lower middle manager for 7 years and never got promoted? Or do I take a massive pay cut to go somewhere? You know what I mean? It seems complex.
yeah. Yeah, I don't think there's a simple answer to it. I mean, I think the market's going to have to work itself out, and it's just taking a lot longer than I think people anticipated. But I am hopeful. I mean, more companies I'm talking to are talking about, things are picking up. Their, bottom lines are looking better. I mean, you look at the stock market, and that's setting record numbers every single week, right? So at some point in time, you hopefully you're going to see an expansion back of, okay, we've got these projects, let's get them done. Let's take some of the burden off our people. Because I do think while people are thinking on retention, because they're so focused on numbers and bottom line, that they are running lean and mean.
Yeah,
And that means that people are having to pick up that slack and working hard and so forth.
definitely. Definitely seeing that and feeling that as well. Um, so then let's elaborate a bit more on the human in the room concept for even for people who perhaps are not familiar with what you're talking about when you say that.
Yeah, I mean, and this isn't my. I'm stealing this from somebody that I interviewed on my podcast. So,
Amazing.
yeah, I mean, I was interviewing a woman who's a CISO, and she, along with another CISO both have very different backgrounds. One was actually the ballerina that I mentioned, and the
Yes, yes.
other was the former CEO of Army Cyber Command. And so very different backgrounds. One was a technologist, one wasn't, right? And the one thing that they both agreed upon, even though it was different in how they got there, was there has to be a human in the room. There's always going to have to be a human in the room, because there's going to be situations where it's going to require a human to make that determination. And so we had the same conversation you and I are having, or how is this going to impact jobs? What jobs will it impact, and so forth. And the thing that they talked about was, you have to figure out how to elevate yourself in a way that while you're not having to do the repetitive task, you're not doing the things that can be taken over by AI. You may be a part of that, but you're the person in the room that basically has to validate the information, or has to use the information in a way that is a go-to-market strategy, and so forth. And it really is about thinking about your career, about, okay, what is indispensable from a human being the person that's actually going to do that task. And so really, we just had a really interesting conversation around, we didn't get into specifics, but it was really just around, you've got to look at your job every single day and just determine, okay, what are the things that I know that I have to do, and how do you enhance your skill set in that area? And if you're looking at your job and you're going, everything I do is task oriented and repetitive and so forth, it's like, okay, what can you do to improve yourself from a technology standpoint, or whatever it may be, to make yourself more valuable in doing things other than just that repetitive task, and work your way into different parts of being the human in the room, right? And being, as the world changes rapidly, we know that there's still going to be people working, but we also know that the way they work will be different. And how do you get out in front of that? And have you taken an AI certification class that you go on and you learn how to use AI? And one of the concepts that I've always had is AI can make me better at my job. So let me find an AI class that helps me understand how to be better at my job. Well, that exists for developers, that exists for architects, that exists for project managers and business analysts, right? There's tools out there that teach people how to be better, how to utilize AI to be better at their job. Are you doing that now? Have you started that path? And because if you haven't, then you're probably, potentially going to be swallowed up by AI at some point in time. If you're sitting at that seat, if you're out in front of it, how can I use AI to be better at my job? I mean, I think that's really where the human in the room comes in.
Yeah, and that's really interesting. I feel like you tell me if I'm nuts here, but from speaking to people as a recruiter for so many years, whether it's recruiting recruiters or what I did before, which is languages based, I feel like a lot of people have a picture when you ask them, what is growth? What is career progression to you? They often outline, well, I'm kind of frontline right now and I'm dealing with people in some way or other. And then I would like to manage people and get them to do the thing. And then I would like to only deal with a couple of people who are the managers of the people, meaning they're removed from, so you have less and less and less interaction with people. You're speaking to fewer people and speaking to fewer people less every single day, or every single, promotion that you get. With what you're describing, it kind of sounds like that's not a great way of thinking about your career, because if you're thinking that the reward is to not use your people skills, are you eventually putting yourself out of a job in the way things are changing?
Yeah. I mean, I think that's a part of it. I go back to something somebody said to me once, and this was a C-level executive for a very, very large technology organization, and his comment is, he goes, "Look, there was a point in my career where I took a step back in title to take a step forward in my career, and I think, when you talk about what people generally see as how do I grow, I think there may be, what he said to me kind of stood out really, really powerfully, because he's saying, look, growth is not necessarily the title or the salary. It's what you're doing that gets you to that. Right. And are you taking something, like he said, he was a high level executive with an organization, but he had a hole in his game, meaning a skill set that he didn't exist in what he was doing. And he felt like he really needed that in his background for him years from now to be even, the executive that he is today. Right. And so he took a step back, but that step back was growth in his mind to help him develop his career. And the growth came, as opposed to, I got a bigger title, I got more money and so forth. In his mind, I needed to grow my skills.
Right.
And I think what I see way too often is, well, how do I grow? Well, what does growth mean to you? Well, to your point, how do I manage people and do things like that? That's not helping you grow yourself and your brand and who you are. You've got to start looking at the world, especially in the world that we live today, about how do I grow me? How do I, because if I grow me and I grow my skill set, everything else takes care of itself. And that was his point. Now he's a CEO of a massive organization. And he said, I probably wouldn't be here if I didn't have that experience. But I wanted to grow myself before I said, hey, grow me in my title or grow me in my compensation.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. And here's a guy who's now CEO of a huge corporation. It's a great example too. I think that's wonderful. Thank you for that. Actually, I'm going to play that clip for candidates when they.
There you go.
when they are
Yeah.
thinking too much about just people management or
Yeah.
quick money. Okay, I would like to do something that we've been doing at roughly this part of the show this year in season 3 of our show, which is over under little word game called over
Oh
under.
boy.
You
Here
familiar
we
with
go.
over under?
I do know. I know how it works. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah. So it's basically, if is the following thing overrated or underrated in your opinion, and why maybe.
yeah.
So rapid fire, just a few things at you. These are going to be recruitment related because it's recruiting EQ,
Sure.
the show. But hey, okay, ready?
Go for it.
Resumes over under.
And okay. I'm not rapid firing here.
No. That's okay.
I,
Me rapid fire, but you can.
I still think that they are underrated. I mean, you need a good resume and so forth. I wouldn't go completely overrated, although I do think the way you prepare your resume for jobs is very different, right? You have to stand out in a world that is very AI driven, and we used to tell people you need 1-2 resumes just to go out and get a job. Now I think you almost have to like have a resume for every job that you apply for, a different resume, right? It has to be catered to that because the technologies there that most companies are using, or a lot of companies are using, that would really be detrimental if you aren't looking at, am I really catering my resume to that job?
Yeah, that's a great question. And you know what? Everybody has said the same thing that I've asked that question to on the show, which is counter to a lot of candidates seem to be cynical these days. Like, what's the point even? I throw these resumes into an abyss. They're not being looked at by a human. But interestingly, it's like what I'm getting from what you're saying is you can't just hide behind the regular resume that just says where you worked and the same as your
Yeah.
LinkedIn. You can't hide behind that. You got to be yourself in some way
Yeah.
to stand out.
I mean, it's not going to go away. You got to figure out how to do it. I think it's just have to do it in a very different way, which is, I understand the frustration, right? People aren't used to having to do that, but I do think that that's where the world is going.
Awesome. Okay. What else was I saying? LinkedIn.
I think it's I like it. I use it a lot.
Same.
I mean, I really like LinkedIn. So I am a big like believer that it is underutilized. I think, and with some of the things that they're coming out with and some of the insights that they provide, from my side, I think it's great. And I think if you're a candidate, the networking aspect on LinkedIn is amazing. And if you use it as a networking tool to build your pipeline and really engage with your pipeline, when you go to look for a job, that would be the first place that I would go, is work my network on LinkedIn. And so in my mind, I think it's underrated.
Totally agree. Cover letters.
Yeah, I'm going to go overrated. I've never been a cover letter guy, and maybe that's just me. I don't know. I mean, some people write them and they like them and so forth. I've never had anybody tell me that, why didn't you give me the cover letter when I'm, working with a client? So, I mean, I think there's so many things that are more important, catering your resume to the job, using your network, that are so much more important than a cover letter.
Fair. Definitely the way people use cover letters now, I would say, is useless, because most of them just like write their resume in paragraph form.
Yeah. I mean, again, if you're going to write a cover letter that really addresses the issue, I mean, addresses the job, then but I mean, then you're talking about, that's a full-time job.
Yeah, for sure. It would be reserved, I guess, for if you had some sort of real special like story of why you really want to work for this company, or
and I think in those cases, yes. I mean, that is, if this is a place that you really want to work, and do your research and show why you've done your research and what you've researched and so forth, and I think that makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. That's a great piece of advice for anyone listening. AI, big one. Over.
I mean, it's totally underutilized, underrated right now. I mean, it'll be massively different than what we're doing right now, and I think in a lot of ways, in a lot of good ways, right? I mean, the things I don't like about AI are, you get on social media and you don't know, is that post AI or is that real, right? And
Hell
I
yeah.
don't love that part of it. But the way it helps you work, I mean, the way it helps me work, I mean, I don't buy anything now without asking my best friend Chat GPT, you know, for reviews. And so in my mind, it's got to be underrated because there's just so much more that it can do that we haven't even touched yet.
Do you name your chat GPT? Like, do you speak to it like by name, or is it?
I haven't done that. No, but I do call him my best friend. So
Yeah. I also haven't named it, but I learned this morning, my colleague Jenny, hers is Kevin, and I love that. Let me ask Kevin. That makes me so happy.
Yeah, maybe I do need me. I mean, I don't know. Does it get weird when I start talking to Kevin? I mean,
yeah, exactly. We need to talk about Kevin.
Yeah.
Deep cut reference to an old movie, but okay. Counter offers, over under.
I think in the world today they're underrated. I mean, I think companies again are focused on retention, and I do think that they still exist. I see them that they still exist, and probably not to the degree that they were maybe 10 years ago. But I mean, I'm still seeing that in the world that does exist. So I would never. I'm always I think counter offers are so it's just one of these like catch-22 situations, right? You want to leave your company because of X, Y, and Z, and then when you go to resign, they say, well, we'll fix X, Y, and Z, and then you say, oh, okay, now I want to stay, but that or was X, Y, and Z really the reason why you want to leave, right?
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I mean, I would still go under.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, hearing under from a lot of people, from myself recruiting recruiters, I think I'm a bit out of touch. So I appreciate that feedback, because obviously the recruiter thing that everybody in my age bracket or whatever else was trained on was they're the worst. You're going to get confidentially replaced 100% of the time, pretty much, or like 90% of the time. If you accept a counteroffer, you've destroyed your career. But it doesn't seem to be that black and white anymore, like you're saying.
Yeah, and I think that I mean, companies again are, if you can keep somebody that's been with you for a while, and there's a value proposition in that knowledge that you don't want walking out the door. And I do think that one, try not to get there to where your people are looking for another job, but
Sure.
two, I mean, I wouldn't be as a candidate. I would advise against taking a counteroffer, because I do think that you do open yourself up to loyalty and so forth and so on. But
Yep.
in some cases, they can be very valuable and certainly valid to accept. I mean, but just I always caution people: you shouldn't be looking for a job for money and money only, because that's the easiest thing to fix. You should just go have a conversation with somebody.
Yeah, that's very good advice. Cold calling, over or underrated?
I'm going to say it's totally underrated, and here's the
Yes.
reason why. I say this to people all the time, and your listeners, and so forth. How many emails do you get, solicitation emails, on a daily basis?
Oh my God,
I can't even count them.
Yeah.
Right? Well, and here's the thing: I can't count them because I just delete them. Right? I don't ever keep them. I don't read them. If I don't recognize it and so forth, it's deleted. But I listen to every voicemail that I get, but I never get voicemails. I never get people calling me. And maybe that's, I'm in a different generation where in the world today, nobody leaves voicemails, to your point, the younger generation,
I do.
just text. Yeah. But I in my mind, pick up the phone and call somebody, and you create it. If your tone and your enthusiasm and so forth, that all comes through in a voicemail. It all comes through in a phone call, and it doesn't in an email or a text and so forth. Yes, people may be more apt to look at their text, but I mean, do I answer the phone every time somebody calls that I don't recognize the number? No, but if they leave me a voicemail, I listen to it. And there's something called brand recognition, and every person in the staffing industry is trying to create brand.
Yeah.
And
Well said.
how do you create brand if nobody knows who you are and hears your voice and so forth and so on? I mean, so I'm a huge believer in cold calling, and I see it work. I mean, the people who are most successful in my organization still pick up the phone and talk to people.
Yeah, couldn't agree more. I feel like that cold calling has this weird bad rap that it's all like scripted and car salesman. It doesn't have to be like that. You can
Well,
be
it
yourself.
used to be, yeah, it used to be, you know, and you know, and then look, I mean, it's nobody likes it. No, I don't think anybody. I've never met anybody that said, "Oh, I'm so excited to make 100 calls today," right?
Oh boy, yeah.
But in the end, I mean, it's I'm excited to connect with like people, and you know, the most fun you can have in sales and staffing and so forth is talking to people and
Absolutely.
having conversations and understanding and you know, email, text, and so forth. Yes, they're convenient, but that's not how you build relationships and get to know people.
Yeah, and they're not fun. You're right. They're boring. Emails. Working from home versus working in the office.
Oh, I'm a total office guy. So
Yeah.
as I sit here and have this conversation from my home, so, I'm a hybrid. I don't think we have to have people back 100% in the world today. And I know a lot of companies are going that route, but I do think that interaction is really important. I you know, you being in sales, me being in sales, I was fortunate enough that I grew up around people that I learned from just by listening to them.
Totally.
You can't do that from your home. Right. So, and in some jobs, yeah, remote makes total sense, right? You sit there and so forth. The only thing I would go back to is if you're working from home and you don't need to interact with anybody, are you doing repetitive, tedious tasks that could potentially go away, right? I mean, it's so hard, you know, for somebody like me who's I'm an extrovert. I like being around people. I learn best when I'm around and listening to other people, and I think most people learn that way as well. I get the conveniences of working from home. I get how, I mean, I can, you know, I go make myself a sandwich and it's lickety split. I'm back and I'm back working. But I definitely don't ever want to be 100% remote.
Yeah, I hear you. Specifically, I think that's good advice for people getting started too, if they want that job security and to be able to hear what other people are saying. So
yeah, I mean, get into an office and get to know people and start building, you know, your internal brand with your company, right? Forget about your external brand too. You've got to build internal brand. You know, nobody does a job in isolation. You have to work with people, and the better your relationship is with the people that you work with, the better you'll be off to help your career grow.
Yep. And you know, one of the things that when you look up what can humans do that AI doesn't, one of them is resilience, right? And I feel like getting past that slight anxiety of being around people all the time. I'm kind of an introvert extrovert, so I get it. I have definitely experienced that. My point is, if you push past that, it is a lot more fun to be around people and talk to people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, let's do one more. Do we want to do one more? Yeah. I mean, what about working with a recruiter versus trying to go to your job search on your own?
It's definitely underrated. You should always work with a recruiter when you're looking for a job. Yeah. Look, I mean, you know, and you and I've been doing this. I've been doing this a long time. You've been doing this a long time. The advantage of it is if you use recruiters in the way that help you network, get out in front of people and so forth, there's advantages of it. I mean, you know, if you're any good at what you do as a recruiter, you've got relationships with your clients and you're going to be able to get people in front of them because you have that relationship. Now, on the flip side, I get it as a candidate looking for a job. Sometimes working with a recruiter is not a lot of fun. Don't get calls back. You know, they're you know, why aren't they following up with me with, you know, feedback and so forth? Get it. Hear it from candidates all the time. I hear it from clients all the time.
Yep.
In the end, not working with a recruiter, you don't get the expertise, you don't get the relationship that's already built with that client, and in some cases it may not matter, because some of our clients you don't get to build relationships with anyway. But I do think that, if you utilize their expertise on how to build your resume, how to like really go to market, they have access to so many more things than you would on your own. I mean, if you're looking for a job, you should be at least registered with one or two firms.
Yeah. Find one you like, everybody. Maybe you had one you didn't like or who didn't get back to
Yeah.
you. We're not all the same, I swear.
No, we aren't. But I mean, it's like anything. I mean, people hate used car salespeople because they bucket them in this list. But there's some really good used car salespeople out there, right? People who are really helpful and really good. It's the same thing in recruiting. I mean, there are just some people who aren't very good at it and maybe don't love their job and aren't as passionate about it. And it doesn't mean that the whole industry is that way, right? We all need to be better about feedback and follow up and so forth. And I think that's just a human thing. I don't think that's relegated to staffing or sales or anything. I mean, I think people need to have some general thought about, being better at that aspect. But look, I mean, there's so many, and I've seen it. I've been fortunate enough. I've changed hundreds and hundreds of people's lives over the years, and that's the great benefit about being in staffing is, you can definitely impact the individual very powerfully if you're doing what you should be doing.
Yes, fully agree. Very well said. Well, that is our time. I'll stop torturing you by making you say over-unders and so on. Thank you so much for joining us, Shaun. Everybody, check out Shaun's podcast, How Did You Get That Job? There's already tens of thousands of people who listen to it, but you should be one of them also.
Yeah, no, I always want more.
Yeah, exactly. More is good. Shaun, thank you so much for joining us on Recruiting EQ. It's been a pleasure having you.
Yeah.
Yeah, and see you all Wednesdays at noon.